Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you especially to Jamie Ramsay, endurance adventurer, who has shared a little bit of his time this morning. Thanks for joining us, Jamie.
Thank you very much for letting me kind of join in the conversation with you.
We're delighted to chat to you. I've been a fan for a long time, so it's great to be able to spend this time and pick your brain. Thank you for your time. So just to give everyone a bit of an overview, for those who don't know you, which I'm sure isn't many people, Jamie has taken on some absolutely phenomenal challenges over his life and is a really avid climber, a really avid camper, a really avid hiker, runner, cycling, basically you name it, and you seem to have tried it. So do you want to just give everyone a bit of an overview as to your sort of outdoors journey, if you like, and sort of how you got into being so active outdoors and what your passions are?
Yeah, so adventuring, I've been doing it for a while now, but it's not as long as quite a lot of people think. A lot of people think I've been adventuring my whole life, but I actually worked in London for 12 years behind a desk doing boring corporate communications. And in 2014, I found myself in a place where I didn't feel that I could continue on in the city doing what I was doing and feel kind of any sort of fulfillment or happiness or contentment. And I kind of went through my life and thought back to moments when I had been happy and felt like I achieved something. And it had been at that time I was into running, and it had been a run I'd done in Vietnam, 240 kilometers, solo and unsupported, just running along a main road, finding places to stay every night. And when I found myself in this kind of little bit of a hole in 2014, I transported myself back to that moment and thought, I want to recreate this moment going forward in my life. That I want that passion to be what I do. So I started off in 2016, and I was Jamie is running was my Instagram handle, and that's what I was going to do. I was going to do big adventures, solo, endurance, kind of getting out there and exploring the world. So I flew over to Vancouver and ran 17,000 kilometers down to Argentina. Yeah, just it does sound weird when I kind of say that number, because it is huge. And I watched videos of other people going, "We're gonna run 1,000 kilometers." I'm like, "Christ, it really was quite a long way." But I think the way my mind was, it was a little bit like a self-therapy thing. I kind of was in a place that I wanted to get out and I wanted to do running, and I kind of viewed it very much as a job. So it sounds big as a big number, and this is going to sound silly as well, but it's actually only about a marathon a day I was running, and I just had to achieve that on a day-to-day basis. Oh. And I got to the end of this, and I kind of reinvented myself as an adventurer. And the way I like to see it is that run was like my university of adventure. And from that, I was going to be able to go on and do other things. And that led to doing more running. I ran the Outer Hebrides and Isle of Skye. I ran the Three Peaks. So climbed Ben Nevis, then ran to Scafell, up that, then ran to Snowdon. I then kind of got involved in some kind of more kind of organized races. So I raced across the Alps twice with Gogh. I did the Cotswold the Cape Wrath Ultra up in Scotland, which was a 400-kilometer race. So I got really into running, and I realized that I was just proving that I was good at doing the same thing again and again. So I started to branch out. So I thought, well, I'm really good at the camping aspect. I'm really good at the kind of being alone. I can navigate. What other ways can I do this where I'm not just running? So I went to cycle touring and went over to South America, cycled across the Andes. I went into wilderness hiking, hiked across Utah. I then kind of climbed up Aconcagua, cycled across Australia. And I was going to run Madagascar, but a lingering injury kind of took that away from me. And then kind of since then, I've been planning next adventures. So I think right now my tally is something like 33,000 kilometers of adventuring, wow, human-powered, in about 28 different countries. So
that's incredible. And I love the whole reinvention. I think a lot of us end up in careers that we think, oh, that's just what I do. And, for a lot of people, it doesn't make them particularly happy. And I really love that freedom that comes from just deciding, I'm sure that was scary and not an easy decision to make, to walk away from, a secure lifestyle and think, actually, do you know what, this doesn't make me happy. But it's so inspiring to listen to someone who has actually just thought, no, I'm not doing this for the rest of my life, and totally turn things on its head. That's incredible.
Well, one of the things I find quite is a lot of people look, oh my God, you did this adventure, and now you're like, you're going to be the happiest guy in the world because you follow your dreams and your passions. And I think the thing that I actually learned was, I think we all have inner demons and self-doubt built into us. And we can either learn to let that control us, or we learn how to control it. I don't think it ever goes away. So I think what adventuring has done is it's allowed me to create the tools I need to be able to manage my weaknesses and my self-doubt, and allow me to find how to draw out the best in me and to push myself. And I found that rather than sitting in a comfortable job, I find that is where the weaknesses get hold of me. But if I'm pushing myself to the limit and I'm on the edge, then that's where I can live in a more free place personally. So
it's very inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. And obviously, camping plays a huge role in basically everything that you plan and everything that you do.
Yeah.
And you've agreed to come and talk to us today and just share a bit of knowledge around camping and where to start. And a lot of people who are watching this, some people will be really new to camping, and others will be people who've done it for a long time. So do you want to just firstly, I guess, share a little bit about your love of camping, where it started for you, and how you started to be able to integrate that into your adventures?
Yeah, the wonderful thing about camping is that it is the kind of, as you said, it's the thing that you need to do on every single adventure. If you're going to do a multi-day adventure, you need to sleep somewhere, and the tent is the place you're going to do that. So a lot of people would think that camping is something that I grew up with and I did lots, and I was a budding little camper when I was young. And that really isn't the case at all. I camped, obviously, when I was young, but I was never in charge of the camping. I would just sleep in a tent that someone had put up. And I honestly think that one of the first big camping adventures was the first night of my Running the Americas adventure back in 2014. I remember I kind of arrived at the end of the first day, and I'd done so much planning and thinking and all that when I got to setting up the tent, I was like, I have no idea how to set this tent up.
Well, I'm glad it's not just us that gets to that point and thinks, right, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like where there's got to be instructions somewhere, and you're like sitting there, it's a two-man tent, and it's like, I was only one of me. And I can remember just thinking that I just didn't. But from that moment, like as soon as I had the kind of sense of achievement when I'd set it up and I camped my food and I got into the tent and I lay down, I'd run like 42k, and I was like, it was that being in the tent was the little place of safety where you, at the end of the day, you can actually let your guards down, you can relax. And it was like, I feel good in this moment, in this cocoon. And then for camping ever since then has just been this kind of every single adventure. The being in the tent is such a special time for me, where I'm quite an ordered person, so everything is in order, everything has a place, everything has a routine. And I can remember coming back from Running the Americas and like sleeping in a bed was just a little bit weird. I much preferred sleeping on like hard floors, or and like any opportunity I get out there, and I prefer to be in a tent. So yeah, camping it's just a special time. And I am a solo adventurer, and I do love being by myself, but actually sharing a camping experience with other people is something that's really fun. And on a few of the adventures, I've been lucky enough to actually be in the tent with the person that I'm on an adventure in. Okay. This was mainly like Aconcagua. I spent 13 nights in a two-man tent on the side of a mountain with one of my best friends, and just like sleeping next to each other, eating our meals next to each other. And you get a kind of, it breaks down any kind of barriers, because you can't disguise anything in a tent. So I just love how close it brings you to the environment you're in, and also the people you're with.
Oh, I love that. And so obviously the adventures you've gone on, they've been really varied. So do you have a tent for every occasion, or do you have a go-to tent that you kind of take with you? How many tents do you actually have?
Right now I have 6 sleeping kind of arrangements, and I thought it might be easy to if I talk through each of the tents, I can give
Brilliant.
a little. So like, this is the tent that I took on my running the Americas. I've written down, this is a Van Gogh Xenon Ultralight 2. This is actually the Nitrolight, but what it would call now is the Xenon. This is like a really cool 2-man tent that is kind of got hooped rings, and then it has a kind of garage at the front. So when I was running the Americas, I could actually wheel my little baby stroller into the front area of the thing and like park my thing, so it was all secure. So all my kit was inside, and then I'd have a lot of room on the outside. And kind of the memories I have of this tent, like the places I've been in this tent, are just amazing. And I actually got the little chap I shared the tent with right here. This is Carlos the bear. I found him in Mexico, and this would be the bear that I would cuddle every night in the middle of deserts and up mountains. So I'll just put Carlos over there. But yeah, this tent, it's just one of those ones that the screensaver on my computer is a picture of the inside of this tent, because it just, when you're in really crazy places, and the tent is all orange inside, so it's got this lovely warm kind of feeling. And then the doors are open, and I've got the Union Jack on the back of my running machine, and I managed to run, like, I had this tent for 16 months on that adventure. Nothing ever went wrong with it. It was the most amazing tent. I brought it back, did one speech at a corporate event, and the first guy who tried to set it up as part of a task managed to snap the pole, and I was just like, seriously. But so it was absolutely the best tent I could possibly have for like a running adventure with a baby stroller, because it gave me the room I needed over that adventure. But it is quite heavy. It weighs in like 2.5 kilos. So for someone who's a runner or a cycler or trying to go up mountains, it really is a little bit too heavy for a one-person thing. If you're with 2 people, the good thing is you can always split the weight. So someone can take the poles and the pegs, and the other one takes the materials, and then you kind of have an even. And that brings it down to like just over 1 kilo tent each, and that works quite well. So this tent, if anyone ever asked me, this would be my favorite tent. This has the most amazing memories for me, and it's falling apart slightly, just the case, but I do take it out every once in a while and clean it and give it a little bit of love. The next tent I have, now this is not the original case. This is a little Van Gogh Ultralight Helium 1 tent. I got this for when I got back from running the Americas. I was wanted to move away from the running stroller and have a backpack on and have everything on my back, because the thing I felt that the running stroller held me back on was I couldn't leave tarmac. I had to always be on roads, and I really wanted to get away from the roads and explore more tracks and mountains and hills and camp next to lakes and things like that. So I got this tiny little tent, weighs 1.2 grams. It normally packs down a bit, so the reason it doesn't have it, I'm going to blame him live. So the reason this doesn't have its original case is when I was running across Iceland, a certain chap called Raoul Monks, who is a friend of your shows, he somehow managed to lose the bag. But I found a replacement, so all is okay. But this tent is a great little tent. It's very lightweight. If you kind of take the poles out, strap them to the back of a rucksack and stuff everything inside, it's a nice, easy tent to put up. It is for what I'm onto now, it's a little bit heavy, so I don't really use this tent as much. But I do have amazing memories of cycling across South America with this. So I've got pictures of this tent with alpacas walking around it. And it's just kind of, it's a warm tent. It's built by a company who are based up in Scotland. So when they're building the tents, they're thinking about what the elements are going to be doing to the person inside. So it's really going to protect you in that way. So yeah, if you're looking for a light one-man tent, something like this would work well. It's kind of a single hoop in the middle with like pulled down on either side. Then it comes on to my biggest tent. This is the Van Gogh Mountain 2. And I'm not sponsored by Van Gogh. I just happen to have lots of Van Gogh tents. This is a Force 10 Mountain 2 tent. Now, this is a tent that's built for mountains and like extreme conditions. And I've used this tent on 2 of my expeditions. The first one was Mongolia. And I wanted a tent that was going to be really, really solid, and that was going to be able to take the impact of the kind of extreme temperatures out there and the extreme weather. So I took this, and luckily I didn't have to carry it because it weighs in at 3.5 kilos. This was actually carried by one of our camels as we trekked. It was minus 25 degrees. And this tent is for anyone who's looking for a tent that's kind of, you just want something that is not going to move. Once it's in the ground, it's in the ground, and it's going to be compact. The other great thing about it is it's a 2-man tent. It has 2 entrances. So if there's 2 of you, you can have an entrance each, and each of the entrance areas has an area where you can leave your stuff, and you can easily access it at night, and you're not going to annoy the other person. One of my fondest memories when I was in Mongolia of this tent was when you go to bed at night, you're in your sleeping bag, and you go to bed and you're in a little, I was where I had 2 mats, then this sleeping bag, then another sleeping bag on top inside the tent. And when you wake up in the morning, you switch on your headlight and the whole of the inside of the tent is frozen and sparkles. And it's just, you're just sitting there, just start trying not to move as you just watch this utterly beautiful scene in your tent, knowing that as soon as you start to move, that is all going to melt, and then everything inside your tent is going to be absolutely. So you have to. It's minus like 20 outside. You're in your sleeping bag. You're nice and warm, and you know that as soon as you start moving, you basically have to throw your sleeping bag outside so it refreezes, and that you get everything out your tent as quickly as possible, and then you pack it all up so it never actually unfreezes. So then it never gets wet.
Sure.
I just remember I was with a guy called Gabriel, and we just huddled every night in the tent, the 2 of us next to each other, watching. I think I introduced him to Dexter. He'd never watched TVs before. We're in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, no, it wasn't. It was A Good Wife.
How surreal.
So there's me in the middle of Mongolia, 10 camels, and we're watching A Good Wife, just me and this guy. And just really fun memories of that. And then this was the tent also for when you're doing a mountain adventure, something like Aconcagua, which is the highest peak in the Southern Hemisphere. It's an expedition mountain. So it took us 11 days to get to the summit. Okay. And for that 11 days to get to the summit, you need to have a tent that is going to be able to operate at 6,000 meters as well as lower down. So again, you need that rigidness. And again, it is a heavy tent, but between 2 of us, we split the tent. I took half, Al, my climbing partner, took the other half. And I just have so many fond memories. Well, one of us trying to set up the tent was an absolute nightmare because I just sleep anywhere. Al wanted it to be absolute flat. So you're sitting at kind of 5,500 meters, like struggling to breathe. And he's sitting there going, no, this is not quite, no. And you're like, you set up the tent. But the photos I've got of this up at kind of 6,000 meters, looking out over the Andes is just stunning. The funniest thing was not actually in this tent, is when we finished our successful summit of Aconcagua, we came back down and we were leaving, going back to the town, and I was like, so I'll try and find that hostel and see if we can get into the hostel. And he was like, no bloody way. I spent 13 nights in that tent with you. We are staying in the bloody Hilton. And he phoned up, booked us into the Hilton.
I'm on his team.
Yeah, he was like, I don't care. I will pay for you if you're too cheap to pay for your own hotel. So one of the things that makes me laugh about this tent is that remembering of just, even though we had the best time together, and part of Al was really looking forward to getting away.
I think you're really highlighting as well that, with all of these adventures, and I think specifically with camping, there are so many memories and moments of humor and moments of just despair if the weather turns, or even in those moments where with camping when things just don't feel ideal, whether it's the conditions or whether you're sleeping like this or whether the wind's battering you, if you're with people who mean something to you, actually when you look back, those memories are going to be so precious.
I think you always remember the tougher moments more sweetly in hindsight than you do if you just go on a rosy little camping trip and everything's fine, you don't really remember it. But as you said, it's the kind of, I remember on the running the Americas, like the places where I couldn't get the tent into the ground, and just sitting there sobbing because I can't get. I'm in the middle of on the kind of side of the Andes in a desert plateau, and the ground's too hard. And when you finally get it done and you lie in the tent, you eat a Snickers bar or something, and it just adverse conditions in camping make beautiful memories. The next tent is the Msr Hubba Hubba Nx2, which anyone out there who uses one of these will have a love for it. This is, where the other tent was my favorite tent, this is the tent I would recommend to anyone who was buying a tent. If you wanted to buy one tent to do everything, it would be this one. And there are a few reasons for that. One, it's thought out. It's really well designed, even down to the normally you have this bag that you try to shove the tent in and you can never work out how it came out of that bag. This one has got, like, very cleverly, it goes in the side, so you open up the side of the thing and you just put it in. So just when you're kind of get to the end of a long day, you just have to take out a tent and just put it up quickly. It's all just easy. It's also a standalone tent, which none of my other tents really are. So the design of it is it's got two kind of wishbones at each end and then a central structure with a kind of spine across it, which means you don't have to be on kind of soft ground where you can get tent pegs in. So I've had times when I've been in slept in bus shelters, but you can just still set up the tent and just place it on the ground, and it's going to give you that comfort, that shelter, that actually you're not going to have to worry about putting in, which makes a huge difference if when you don't know if you're doing multi-day, like different terrain adventures, having that kind of flexibility really helps. It's also quite lightweight. It's only 1.7 kilos. So if you're going on a bike, it fits perfectly. I use this for cycling across Australia. It fits perfectly on the front of the bike. I used it for trekking across Utah on the Hayduke Trail in America. Perfectly just looped down at the bottom of your rucksack. It's really easy, quick to put up. And just like everything in it is just like the proportions are the right. You can sit up, you can do everything. It's not too expensive, but it's a great. If anyone who's looking for that entry level tent, this is definitely the one I would go for. And yeah, it's the kind of my go-to tent for most adventures hiking nowadays.
That's really helpful. Thank you. That I'm sure will be one of the questions people would ask the most. Where do I start with this? Which tent should I get? Because if you haven't, obviously there are so many variations for so many different adventures people might be going on. So thank you. That's really helpful to have that.
Well, one of the things with kit is a lot of people quite often, and I was guilty of this, is that you look at the amazing kit and then you feel you can't afford it, so you go for the cheaper kit, and then you end up using the cheaper kit and realizing it's not as good, and it's not going to give you the longevity. It's not going to be something you keep turning back to, and you are going to have to buy that expensive kit later down the line. So I think what you want to do is think really clearly about all the adventures you want to do and find the tent that will do all of them, and not think, I need this tent for this adventure, this tent for this adventure. Sure. It's better to have one tent that will do everything. I was speaking to a mountaineer last night called Di Gilbert, and she uses a kind of shop smart, and it does. If you buy the right kit, it will be there with you for life. So when all these adventures, I went to run across Iceland. It was like 600 kilometers through the heart of Iceland and some pretty chaotic places. I made the curious decision that I was going to do a tarp for the first time. I'd never had a tarp before. But when you have like the one-man tent I was using here, and then you look at the option of taking a tarp, you can kind of see why some people might be lulled into this little kind of 310 gram tent shelter. I'm a tent person, was my conclusion at the end of that. It was great. Like this tiny little thing. You need to have if you're out running or hiking, you're going to have a hiking pole. It's great. but it doesn't give you the shelter and the kind of the ability to recover that being in a tent does. And if you're out there, the way I look at it is you're out there for the whole day doing whatever it is you're doing, and then at the night you probably spend more time in your tent than you did doing whatever else was you're doing. You go to bed at like 8 o'clock at night, you get up at 7, 8 the next morning, you're in there for nearly 12 hours. So you want to be comfortable, and it's worth the little bit of extra weight to actually have an enjoyable time in the tent. So unless you're a glutton for punishment or just going out for a one-night camping thing, the tarp is great, but you need to have a hiking pole, and then you probably need to have a ground sheet. So that's an extra piece of kit. And then if there's midges or anything like that, then you need to have the midge sheet. So actually the weight and the bulk all kind of adds up.
Yeah.
And
which is everything the tent is providing anyway. So you're basically just adding it on.
Yeah. So just getting a clever tent that's actually going to take you to all your adventures. So that's kind of where I am. The kind of one I'm using at the moment. So this is where a lovely blend of the two. This is a kind of the lightweight one-man tent, but also the kind of Hubba Hubba tent, but made a little bit smaller. And this is the Msr Carbon Reflex One. And this is what I've used for my recent adventures, cycling and stuff like that, just because it is really light. It's like 600 grams, and it is a proper tent. It's really easy to put up, but it's not a standalone tent. And that's the one thing about it that I find frustrating, is you need to kind of stick it in the ground. So while I have this tent and I love this tent, and this is probably the tent I will use on my next adventure, which is going to be a big one, and sadly I can't tell you what it is, but this will be the tent I will take on that. But if I was going to be looking, I'd kind of MSR do a kind of a lightweight version of the Hubba Hubba, which is the same kind of wishbone with the spine that allows you to set it up, and it's a standalone tent. So if I was rebuying, I'd have done a wee bit more research and got a standalone one-man tent, and it might come in at 900 grams, but that extra 300 grams is going to allow you to have just a bit more versatility with where you can actually camp. So those are my six ones. The other option is to take a hammock. I'm a big fan of a hammock. It doesn't allow you to have that kind of shelter that I was talking about, but if you're going somewhere where there are trees and the weather is going to be good, it is a really enjoyable experience. And I did it a few times when I was running the Americas. But yeah, that would be the other option. And the one I haven't mentioned is bivy bags. I've never really been a bivy bag person. Again, because most of the time I'm looking for recovery when I'm sleeping at night. So I'd rather take the extra weight, and just sleeping in a bag, just to me, is not something that comes naturally to me. Maybe I'm just a bit soft. But I have ordered one.
Maybe it's where you're actually adventuring as well. I'm not sure I'd want to be sleeping in something like that when you're at 5,000 foot, or it's freezing.
Yeah, and when you've got all your kit, and like quite often the places I'm going to be, it's going to be raining, and I don't want to take a bivy bag and then find myself all my kit's going to get wet. I'd rather just carry that extra weight and know what I'm dealing with, and know that I'm going to be protected and everything's going to be waterproof. So yeah, so that's the kind of run through of the tents I have and that's I use.
That's so helpful. Thank you. And in terms of, obviously, we've talked a lot about sort of keeping gear dry and making sure that, there's different tips for making sure that you have a comfortable camping experience. What would be your, say, top 2 tips for, not someone who's like a hardcore adventurer, but someone who's maybe going camping with their family or going camping for the first time on a solo adventure? What would be your top 2, 3 tips for having a comfortable experience?
Well, okay, so mistakes I've made is we obviously want to find, I'll just put the obvious ones. You want to find somewhere flat and someone that's sheltered. If you are going to be somewhere that is not, it's hard, make sure your tent is on a place where water is not going to run into. I have made that mistake of finding this beautiful flat piece of ground, setting up my tent, it starts raining, the water starts coming, rushing down the hill and collects in the beautiful flat place that you've just set up. I think you also want to make sure that you're going to have all the things around you need. So, make sure you're somewhere near fresh water or running water, so you've got water to cook with. Because if you're out there, you don't want to carry all that water to where you're going to go. So you want to find somewhere where you are going to have the kind of the shelter, the water, everything is going to be close at hand. And for me, the most important, this is not a tip, this is more like an advice or like an ask, is that when we're out camping, we're there to enjoy the beautiful nature of where we are and experience and soak it all in. And that's not just there for us, that's there for everyone. So it's really important to leave your campsite as if you weren't ever there. So no one would ever know you were there. So make sure you take all your litter. I always take a rubbish bag with me, just so I'm 100% sure that all my rubbish goes. I normally go through my packing, my kit before I go, and take away all the little bits of paper. Like if I'm taking tea bags, I take them out of the packaging, so there's nothing left. And I know there's the romantic idea of having a campfire and all that kind of stuff, but having a campfire can cause so much damage to the ground where the fire is. It leaves a scar on the earth, which will be there for ages, for years and years and years. So make sure that you just enjoy a nice little camping stove. You have the same feeling. Your stuff won't smell of campfires the next day, which is something I find really nice. And don't, I see videos of people going to Iceland and writing, "I was here 2020" in the kind of gravel where they're camping. People don't need to know where you were in a decade's time. So just be really respectful of the environment you're in would be the main tip. And just make sure you've kind of thought of every eventuality. Like, where are you going to go to the loo? You can either take a bag and put it in the bag, or make sure you take a trowel with you so you can dig a hole. And it needs to be you want to be 100 meters away from water when you go to the loo. You want to dig a 6-inch deep hole and then pack everything back up and take your loo paper with you. It's all these little things that you expect everyone else to do, so you can have an amazing camping trip. So make sure that you're doing the same, so the next people that can come along. It broke my heart when I saw all those pictures of people doing camping trips at the end of first lockdown, where people were just having parties and just leaving their tents and all the rubbish. And I was I know that is a select few, and the media have picked them, but it's just consciously, it's a conscious thing you're doing. So just be conscious with how you're doing it.
Absolutely. And I think, given the fact that a lot of people potentially won't be able to travel as they had hoped this year, that, there are likely to be a lot more people enjoying, whether it's the UK or whatever country they're living in, actually having local adventures. So I think that's potentially more important than ever, that we do it mindfully and have that sort of pre-preparation beforehand and think things through. Because, like you say, just simple things like unpacking all the rubbish before you go is such a simple thing to do. But if you haven't thought about it beforehand, you would then end up with bags and bags full of rubbish that you're leaving behind. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and also, so everyone wants to go wild camping. There's kind of, I want to go to places. There's quite a lot of driven by wanting to have that Instagrammable moment and all this kind of stuff. But I think most people will know you're not actually allowed to be doing wild camping in most places in the UK. So just make sure that you've done research. There are places where you are allowed to do it, and there are places where you just need to ask permission to do it. And if you do get permission, you are doing it somewhere beautiful, make sure you kind of, again, think about other people. Set your tent up as it's getting dark and take it down as it's getting light. So if someone's going for a walk to see something beautiful, they don't have your tent stuck in the middle of it. But there are rules about wild camping, so just make sure you've clocked them all before you go.
Thank you.
And also and actually, there's so many campsites that have lost so much business. And there's beautiful campsites, and there's National Trust campsites and all this kind of stuff that you can go and use those campsites and actually pump some money into the economy as well, just to kind of help everyone out. But
absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, so obviously we're getting to that point in the year where people are starting to think about upcoming holidays, whether it's for Easter or over summer. What can people start to do now to prepare themselves for the camping season?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting my tent back out there and actually using it properly. And what I'm doing at the moment is I'm just kind of doing like checks on my tent and making sure that it's in the condition that I think in my mind that it is. So I'm kind of setting my tent up either in my house or in my garden. I'm going over it. I'm checking for holes to see if there's any little tears, any little kind of maintenance things that need done. There's a great little product called Tenacious Tape by Gogh, which is this lovely tape. You can just like fix the holes in your tent just to make sure it stays waterproof. Give it a clean, make sure you've got the right number of tent pegs and all that kind of stuff. And kind of when I've gone on adventures, there's always like, I have light bulb moments. Like, it'd be good to do this, it'd be good to have that. So I kind of set up my tent and sit and think, what, if I'm in here at night, what would I want? I'd be like, I want a clothesline. So I kind of build a clothesline into my tent, or it would be good to have light here. So I research what's the best lantern to get that's lightweight and rechargeable that will sit inside. And then I kind of check that my sleeping mats I haven't got any holes in them, because that's kind of a thing that can happen. So I blow them all up and make sure they stay inflated overnight. I check that my sleeping bags have all been cleaned and they all have liners and all that kind of stuff. So it's just kind of a really good time to take stock and make sure that nothing's broken, everything that's possible can be fixed is fixed, and that all your kit is in a kind of working order, that when you get out, you're not going to have frustrations of like, oh, why did I not do this thing? And we've all had a year to do this stuff. So get it done now.
That's really good advice. And I think it also, it gets you excited for what's coming and gives you a little bit of time to plan.
Yeah, and it's lots of little things. It's just like to stop things that ruining that adventure. So like zips get stuck sometimes. They get like all corroded a little bit. So get in there, clean them, maybe give them a little bit of oil. Because if you suddenly get somewhere and you can't close the door in your tent, like it's just gonna ruin your little adventure.
And you mentioned briefly, so my last question for you, you mentioned your sleeping mat. And for me, I'm a comfort girl. I like to be comfortable. I camped a bit when I was in my teens, but I haven't camped since I've had children. And a lot of it is just thinking, oh, I don't like to be cold. I don't like to be uncomfortable. You know, what do you use to just add a little bit of extra comfort?
So I was saying earlier, shop smart. I went out, bought the cheapest mat possible and slept in it, and it was useless, bulky, and didn't keep me warm. So I looked up what was the kind of most regarded as the best one, which was the Thermarest Neo Air. It's like that thick, cushioned. It keeps you away from the ground. It gives you that layer of insulation. It's expensive. It's going to cost you 130, 160 quid. But that's 3 nights in a travel lodge. And I've used mine on every single adventure. It's an investment worth putting money into. So yeah, get a nice big thick mat. Sea to Summit do a good one, Thermarest do a good one, and it's definitely worth investing in a good mat and a good sleeping bag, and then a sleeping bag liner, because that will keep your sleeping bag clean, but it'll also add an extra degree or two to the warmth. So you can pick up a polycotton one for 13 quid at Cotswold Outdoor, or you can get a Rab silk one, which is going to cost you 50 quid. So both are really good. I have both of them. So
brilliant tips. I love it. Thank you. So helpful. So if people want to sort of follow along, you've obviously got some adventures you touched on, cagily touched on some adventures for this year. Where can
fingers crossed.
Follow, yeah, exactly. Where can people follow your journey? Do you have social media channels and website?
So as I said earlier, I started off as Jamie is Running. I've now rebranded myself as Jamie is Adventuring, because I'm obviously doing slightly different things from just running. So my main places are Instagram and YouTube. I'm not the best at making films, but I try, and I put together little films of my adventures after every one. They're up there. There's lots of kit lists and all that kind of stuff. JamieRamsay.net is my website, and that's AY. Go there, and if anyone has any questions, just ping me a DM, and I'll try and do it over email or even over a call to kind of help you get out there and adventure more.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been, not only super interesting, but really informative. So I think you've given some people some really good tips for how they can kickstart their adventures this year.
Thank you for involving me.
Pleasure. Thank you, Jamie.